Hi there, and welcome back to 355 Code. This is the second part of our weather app JavaScript tutorial. And this is a full-blown weather app that will be able to display the actual live weather and a 7-day forecast, as well as have some other mock functionality of a month display and a daily weather display. And in our first part of the tutorial, we kind of went over how to build the wireframe for the app and how to start using our location API, which basically finds the current location using your IP address. And now in this part, we are going to tap into how we use the actual weather API. And for our weather API, we are going to be using this Open Weather Map website. And they have a free weather API, which you can use. Definitely, it's good for learning purposes. You can make many calls to it for free. And let's get started. So you're going to want to go to this openweathermap.org. And if you don't have an account already, you can make an account. I already have an account, so I'm just going to sign in. And what we want to do is check out the API documentation. And as you can see, there are many different kinds of calls that we can make to this API. And the one we're interested in is going to be this one call API, because this can give us this gives us a daily forecast basically for 7 days. So if we go into the API doc here, then we can see that we get both current and forecast weather data. And that's basically what we need, because we need weather for today and we need weather for 7 days going forward. And let's read how to make this API call. So to make this API call, basically we just need to use this URL. And this URL it has several queries, so latitude and longitude, which we could already get using our IP address location API. Exclude, okay, this is if we just want to leave out any part of the data. We're not going to use this time, but if you really know that you only want, let's say, the current and daily forecast, then you can exclude the other ones so that you're just not downloading extra data for no reason. And the app ID is going to be our API key. And you can get your API key by just navigating to your API key section. Usually you'll want to keep these kind of things secret, but since this is just a free account, I don't mind exposing our API key to you. But you should create your own account and use your own API key for your own private use. So let's just practice making one simple call to this API. So basically what we're going to need to do is copy this. Let's copy this URL over to our app. And I'm just going to paste it right, I'm going to comment it out and paste it right under this set city function. And the next thing that I'm going to want to do is get all the requirements that we have here for making the call. So as we said, we're not going to be using the exclude, so I'm just going to erase this. And what we need here is the API key, so that I will just copy over from right over here. And if you want, you can store that kind of in a variable up on top. So let's say const weather API key, and that will be equal to this. And this is useful practice, because in reality you'll want to store this API key maybe in an environment variable and then call it into your app from externally. But as I said, since this is just for learning purposes, I'm exposing my API key here just to simplify things. And then here, what we can do is we can basically make this template literal, and here we can just copy in our constant, which is the weather API key. And here, don't forget to put a $sign. And then basically, when we uncomment this and use this later on, this will be basically the variable that we stored. And we can do the same thing here, just for latitude and longitude. Okay, so basically now let's focus on getting our latitude and longitude so that we can make a call to this API. So let's create another function, and we'll call this getLandLon, just for short. Sorry, latlon. That makes more sense. And this will also be an async function. And this is going to be very similar to our city function. And we'll just say basically const. Let's call this latlon. And this will be an object. And this object will have latitude and it'll have longitude. And lat will basically, if you want to go back to our data from the IP address API, you can see that basically we need to tap into these two keys, which is lat and lon. So for lat, we'll just have here await. So before we do that, let's just, like we did here, we'll use this const location. And if we want, we could also even break it down and use a deconstructor and just use, let's say, lat lon. This will, kind of, and here, lat lon. Okay, so this will create basically an object called latlon, and let's return this object from this function. So now when we want to make a call for our weather API, so let's make another function, and let's say get weather data. And this will also be an async function. And here, basically, what we're going to need is we are going to need to get our latlon object. So that will be equal to await get latlon. And then we will make the call to our API. So let's say const weather data will be equal to await fetch, and let's copy over this template literal that we have here. And what we can do actually one step further is, instead of calling this const latlon, we can actually break it down like we did before, and then just use those, use these parts of the object directly within our call to the API. And this will just wrap in a try. And here we'll return weather data .json. And don't forget to put an await here as well, because this .json actually is also returns a promise. So we want to wait for that as well. And let's just catch. And if we have an error, then we will console.log error and our error message. And let's just format this. Great, so now we're making a call to our weather API. So let's just, before we return here, let's console.log this, which is what should be coming back from our API, to make sure that everything is working. So last thing that we need to do is, of course, call our getWeatherData function. Let's run our code, and okay, we got an error message. So at least that part of our code is working, and the message is wrong latitude. So okay, so here we have lat.lon. So let's, these are called lat.lon as well. So let's console our, before we return lat.lon here, let's console.log lat.lon, and let's see what comes back over here. Okay, so we can see that this console is not returning anything over here. Let's try running that one more time. No. Okay, so there's some problem with our lat.lon object. So let's just replace this with a constant. Let's just say location. And let's console.log comment this out, location, just to make sure that we're calling the location API and we don't have an issue with that. Okay, so we have a bug. Let's try and find it. And here it is. So here in get.lat.lon, I did not put parentheses, so we weren't actually calling that function. And like most bugs, it was not a fundamental bug, but just a typo. So let's try running that again. And here we didn't break up lat.lon, and great. So here we go. This is our call from the getWeather API. We did throw an error later on. We can debug that afterwards. But for now, what we know is that we managed to call our weather API, and here's all the information that you can see about the weather. And what we're going to really need is to take a deep look at this JSON so that we can break it down and find the information that we're actually going to need, which, as you remember, is this the weather data, the temperature, and the description. The temperature, the description, and the icon. And maybe we will discover that we need some more information as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make a call to this API, and I'm going to just use our API key. So let's get our API key from over here. And let's switch this out. And let's just use lat and lon. that we got back from this call to the API. So this is latch, and switch this out over here, and longitude over here. And let's make a call. And you can see that we get back this very, very complicated JSON file. So let's just look quickly for JSON file reader. Okay, and we can just kind of copy all of our JSON and paste it over here. And you can see that it kind of breaks down the JSON into a more viewable format. So here we can kind of check out the live data that we got back. And you can see that it's an object with objects nested in it, with arrays nested in it. And it's kind of important to understand what parts of the data are what, because that's how we're going to have, because when we break it down, we're going to need to tap into these keys and these arrays properly. So another thing that you can do is you could also just check out the API documentation, and they give an example here of how the data comes back, but I still find that this is not comfortable enough for understanding the layout of the data, and it's best to make an actual call and analyze it using this JSON reader. So let's take a look at the data that came back, and you can see here that we have a object that's called current, and this is basically the weather right now. So this is what we're going to be using on the home page of our app, and there's a lot of information here that we don't need, but what we do need is temperature. And you can see here the temperature seems very high, and that's because it's coming back in Kelvin. If you check this weather app API, and you go down to current here, and you see here it says, let's find temperature units default Kelvin. And then we can check here how to change units used. And basically the way to do that is by adding another another query to the API with units. So you can choose if you want metric, if you want imperial. Maybe you'll even want to be able to change your app between the two, and then you can kind of alter this variable using a button on your app or something like that before you make the calls to the API, or you can make the transfer yourself within the app, so you don't make too many calls to the API. That's up to you and your specific use needs. So for now, what we're just going to use is the imperial units, and let's do that by adding this to the end of our API call, and it's just and units equals imperial. And you'll see that if we make, so now you can see temperature is 294.88, and if I run this code again and we make another call to the API and we check out current temperature 71.26, that's already something that's more clear to us and we can understand in Fahrenheit. Great, so that's the current weather, and we have within current we have a kind of a description of the weather, and the ID, which is not so important to us, description overcast clouds. We also have this main header, which is kind of a more general description, which we're actually going to use later on for deciding our background images, because it'll kind of narrow down the amount of images that we need. And this icon will be important for us to use the Open Weather Maps kind of set of icons, pre-prepared icons. And if you want to create your own icons and use those, you could technically do that as well, but this would be the simplest, to just use their icon data and make another call to get an icon source. So that's what we're going to need for our current weather. And we also have the daily, which gives us a 7-day forecast. And each of these days, okay, is quite similar to our current. But you can see here that it's slightly different. For example, temperature kind of goes more into detail for the min, max, night, and we're just going to tap into this day temperature, etc. So what we want to do is kind of create a new object that will extract the key data that we want from this API and give us a simple object that we can use later on in our app. So let's create another function, and let's call this simplify weather data. And this will also be an async function. And the first thing it'll do is, let's say const weather data is equal to await, and here we're going to just take whoops. Okay. And as we said, we need to, let's have a new const which is simplified weather data, and this will be an object. And this object will be made out of, let's say, our temperature and description, and let's say main, and what else did we want? We wanted our icon, and let's check in our requirements to see if we wanted anything else. No, that's basically what we wanted. And then we can have here, we can have forecast, okay, which will also be an array of objects, and we'll explain soon how to populate this array. So okay, so for temperature, so actually I'm going to call this something a little more clear. So let's say current temp, current, just that we separate between these and our forecast. And okay, so I'm going to be flipping back and forth between our JSON and our app. So let's start with temperature. So that will be our weather data dot current and dot temp. Okay, so this is weather data dot current dot temp, and the current description is going to be current weather. Okay, but weather, you see here, is an array. Okay, so it's going to be weather data dot current dot weather and 0 dot description. Okay, let's go over that again. Current, weather, 0, description. Okay, and the same is for main and for icon. So we could actually instead of using weather data here, we could do current. Okay, and then get rid of this. And here we want current dot weather, and we might be able to simplify this code a little later on, but now it creates quite a good visual of where everything is within our JSON, and it's easy for us to read and understand, which is also important. And here is our forecast. So for our forecast, let's take a look. So here we have daily. Okay, it's an array, and each part of the array is an object. Okay, and each object has subsections. So basically what we want to do is we want to take this array and we want to map it into a new array that's simplified. So let's take a look here. And let's do that process outside of our object. So let's call this simplified forecast. And this will be equal to we're going to call here also the daily. Okay, sorry, we don't need to do that separately, my bad. We could just do this current daily, okay, because you remember inside our JSON, let's make this all smaller, so we have current and we have daily, okay? And here this will be just daily, and remember daily is an array, so we can use .map. Oh, whoops, I should be doing this outside of this. Okay, that's why we were throwing an error before. And so for each day, let's call it. So we're going to have a new object, which is simplified day. And this object will be equal to, we'll have a temp, and we'll have a description, the same as we get the data for our current, for today. Description, and we will have, we don't really need main, because main is only going to be used for our background picture on the main day, sorry, on the current day. So we're not going to tap into that. And we're just going to tap into the icon. Okay, and so, whoops. Okay, so for temperature, let's see what we have to do. So inside each day, to get the temperature, we need .temp. So for this, we need day. Okay, because remember that we're tapping into each item of the array. So each item of this array is an object, and these are the objects. So object 0, 1, 2. So it's basically, this is what we can call day within our map function, our map method. Okay, so we need day, temp, and let's just take day. Okay, for the temperature of the entire day. Temp, day. And for description, we are going to need weather, so day.weather 0 description. Day.weather 0 description. And for icon, it's actually the same thing, just with icon. And now what we can do is basically just pass our simplified day, our new simplified forecast into our into our forecast. So here we could just write simplified forecast. Okay. And the last thing that we're going to do is we are going to return weather data, simplified, what we call it here, simplified weather data. Okay, so now what we need to do is to basically call this function and see if it works. So just before we call it, I'm going to console.log our simplified weather data. And now let's call the function simplify weather data. And let's run our code. And we did not get this console.log, which means we're probably throwing an error somewhere. So after searching through the code, I have found the bug, and this has to do with why we were throwing an error before as well. And that's because when we called this console.log to console this awaitWeather.json, so it was actually calling this method on the weather data, and then when we called it again, it threw an error. Because once the method is called on weather.data, it's already changed into JSON format. So we can't really call that again. So as soon as I remove this console.log, and we're just returning this await, so we can see here that we're not throwing an error anymore, and all of our consoles from within the simplify weather data function are coming back. We do still have some problems here, because if we check out the final object, so we see that we're good with all our current temp, current description, current main, etc. But with our forecast, we're throwing back null. And that has to do with just how I built this map method here. And instead of doing it like this, what I should have done is wrap this within parentheses. And that just has to do with kind of how the map method works. One second. And another parentheses here. And there we go. No, that's wrong. 1 second, we don't want to call that there. First, let's get rid of this console log here. Map, open parentheses, close parentheses, and so one more over there. Yeah, there we go. Okay, and we can format our code. And now let's run our code, and you can see that we're getting back our simplified weather data object. And inside of our forecast, we have objects for each individual date. Great. So now that we got back now we've simplified our data, and we've really extracted exactly the data that we need, and we can use it to populate our app. And that is what we will be doing in the next video. So if you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.